Hello, everybody. Today we have Jeff from Williams Resolve. How you doing today?
Oh, we're not Williams anymore.
Oh, not Williams
Grid
anymore.
serve, grid
Oh,
serve.
grid serve, grid serve. Good
It's all
catch,
right.
good
Even
catch.
even Muntz keeps doing this on the broadcast, so don't worry, don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah. So, I guess let's just start with what got you into esports, and how'd you get the COO, and what are things that we as the community can do and build in the space, and then we'll get into what game developers can do to help build the
Yep,
space a little more.
awesome. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on for starters as well. It's a pleasure to talk. I love the sound of my own voice, so always happy to come on and chat about Rocket League as well. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, so for me, Rocket League, I guess life in Rocket League began way before Rocket League. My esports journey started at EGX, which is like a convention in the UK that we had, and I was volunteering for a company called Special Effect, who are a company that basically help people with disabilities to play video games again, or for the first time. So I was volunteering for them at an event back in 2015. Saw a game there called Rainbow Six Siege, played the game, fell in love with it, ended up getting really good at it by complete accident and playing in the competitive scene. And from there, I kind of realised that these kids that were coming through, the sort of 17, 18-year-old kids, they had way more time to play than I did. They were just better at the game than I was. And I was like, I still want to be around. So I started managing the team. And I kind of made my own organisation off the back of that, a proper bedroom organisation at the time. And then maybe like 12 months later, maybe not quite that long, I joined a team called Barrage, which was an established organisation at the time, and went to run that with a lad that I knew from that was already running Barrage. So I went and did that. I did that for maybe 5 years or something, and managed various different esports titles, which included Rocket League briefly. We had Rise and Ole and Cynical on that roster back in our CSX. But also managed a bunch of different teams in League of Legends, Hearthstone, Call of Duty, a bunch of different esports, and yeah, kind of just built the brand up from there. Until in 2021, I was approached by Resolve, which was a starting esports team, and they wanted my spots that were in League of Legends in the Northern League Championship at the time, and so they offered to buy Barrage off me, and sort of swallowed it up into Resolve basically. So I took a break from esports for about 6 months, went and just focused on my day job, which at the time was policing. So I was a police officer for pretty much the whole time that I've been in esports. So from 2015 to 2022, I was a police officer, and then was promoted to sergeant not long after I sold Barrage actually. And yeah, so I went back to that. I did that, full time. Didn't have any involvement with esports for maybe 6 months, and then I got a call and got asked if I would come back and run the day to day of Resolve. So yeah, did that as well alongside policing again for a little while, and then eventually just transitioned into full time esports. So I started doing. I obviously got the COO role when I initially joined back. I think I was like director of operations or something. Yeah, and then obviously took the COO role, and I've been running Resolve ever since. So initially with Williams, in partnership with Williams, with Rocket League, and then we were also in Fortnite for a little bit with Williams. And then yeah, we obviously took on our new partner GridServe for this new season of Rocket League. Yeah, and that's where we are now.
Yeah, so you basically built this from the ground up.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I feel like even though Resolve, I don't actually own part of Resolve. I feel like part of it is mine because it was taken over. They took over Barrage, which was mine. So yeah, it feels like it's partly mine still.
Yeah. So, what do you think was the biggest challenge coming up? Like starting out as what we Americans call a Discord org. Uh,
Yeah. Okay.
Going from that into like competing seriously and developing a brand that uh, had value
Yeah.
enough for someone to say, "Hey, we want to, take over, and here's money for it."
Yeah, it was interesting. I think the big one is always about finance and capital, isn't it? And how much money you've got. I think we were really lucky. You know, I put bits of money into it myself, but also we were really lucky to work with brands like Lucid Sound, who are a peripheral company, and then also with SteelSeries for a little bit. And those kind of kept us ticking over. Really, they really helped run the day to day. Yeah, and it was just little deals. They weren't huge, but yeah, they helped keep things ticking over. And then you just got to be clever about what esports you pick up and what players you work with, and yeah, there's a bit of luck as well, definitely involved. I think when you're picking out those players that might do something, but yeah, it was a different time as well, right? You know, there wasn't back in 2016, 17, there wasn't quite the investor money, getting poured into esports like there was now. So yeah, it was different, and that money went a lot further, I think, than it does now. That sort of money wouldn't scratch the surface in Rocket League these days, but it was enough to do something back then. So yeah.
So, what do you think? Actually, what is it that you're looking for in a player, like when you're deciding that value? Like, not
Yeah.
just Rocket League, but just like in general. Like, if a player is like, "Hey, I want a X amount of salary," like, what are the factors you're looking at as an org to be like, "Yeah, maybe," or "No," or "Oh, absolutely, we'll pay you that," because like what is it that you're looking at, not just from a gameplay perspective,
Yeah.
but just as an individual brand perspective, like.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we talk about this. We probably do things a little bit differently, and I don't know many teams that do this, but um, I think it's important that the personality fits with the rest of the roster that we're trying to build. Right, we don't want to put people in that are just going to clash. So when we're building rosters, we actually do personality testing. So our head of performance, Alex, he personality tests the rosters. We do a couple of different tests, and that isn't the only thing. That isn't necessarily the deciding factor that that player is going to come here or isn't. But it helps influence that decision, especially when we're looking at multiple different players. But it also helps us when we sign the players. It helps us to know how they like to be coached and things like that. So that's really important. I think in terms of when we're deciding what value, and what we're willing to pay, etc. Obviously, gameplay plays a role in that. Previous results, and I guess how the community sees them and how the tournament and how their teammates see them, right? So there might be some up and coming players. Let's use Zen as an example. Obviously, he had never played RLCS before, but everybody knew he was going to be phenomenal. So that obviously plays some pretty big weight on that decision. But also, I think socials and streaming and all those sorts of things play a role because we, at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, esports is still a very big sponsor-led industry, and we need to be able to try and secure those, and we have to think about who's going to be able to market that sponsor well or isn't, and what eyes are they going to bring to the brand, etc. So all those things play a role. Obviously, the priority is the competitiveness of that roster and how they're going to add to that, but obviously streaming, socials, and all that sort of stuff definitely helps, and that can be a sort of negotiating factor, I guess.
Yeah, so first you got to be good, and then socials are like the extra on top.
Yeah, the cherry on top that give you that little bit of extra money or help you negotiate, like, oh, if I stream X amount every month, maybe I get paid this bit more and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so build a personal brand as well. What do you think that a player should be focusing on once they've kind of developed like the skill sets to play their game?
Yeah, okay. I think it's interesting because you see these players that are fantastic at ones, maybe mechanically very good, and then they have to make the transition into threes, and I think that's a big change. I think working on that and working with your teammates and working on how to be a good teammate, because just passing the ball to your teammate doesn't make you a good teammate. It's all about communication, about how you deal with loss as well. I think some players are really not good at that. Yeah, I think being a good teammate is probably the biggest thing outside of mechanical skill. not just in terms of how you play with your teammates, but how you interact with your teammates outside of the game. I think is a massive thing that probably needs more work on, generally speaking. But obviously in Rocket League, we're working with super young talent sometimes that maybe don't have the life experience. They haven't been part of maybe traditional sports teams or something like that. So I think that sometimes takes some work and some getting used to as well.
So when it came to getting involved with Rocket League as an org, what is it that made you guys want to do that?
Yeah, so I think for Resolve, obviously the partnership with Williams was huge to get into that, and it made sense for them. It's a car related game, although not sim racing, but it made sense for them as a natural partnership to come into Rocket League. But I think Rocket League is great in some aspects because it is brand safe. So for sponsors, nobody's getting shot, nobody's getting killed. The most that happens is somebody gets demoed. So it's relatively brand safe, no matter who you want to work with. It's also relatively easy for sort of non-endemic brands to understand what it is. It's car football at the end of the day. There's nothing too complicated to understand about it. Obviously, the mechanical skill level is super super high, but anybody can sort of follow it along after a minute or so. So I think that's great. Those things are always really important, and also the Rocket League, the RAP, so the Rocket League affiliate program, is really helpful in terms of having those in-game items in-game for organizations in the top 10 in each region or whatever it is they decide that season. I think that is really helpful, and that revenue, whilst it might not be huge and it might not cover the costs of your roster, it definitely it helps. It's not to be sniffed at, and a lot of other games don't offer that. So yeah, that's really good. So I think those all play a role in it.
So when we're talking about the financial aspects of it, what is some things that you feel like are simple that Psyonix or Epic Games or whoever's over the esports could do to give orgs an easier path to profitability based off of being involved in Rocket?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I know that last off season there was discussions around major items and worlds items. So I specifically remember discussing in the off season that this was something they were going to look to introduce. So what the plan was that every team that went to the major or went to worlds, every team attending would get a rev share of all of the items sold that were related to that major. So similar to what they did for Copenhagen, they obviously had major items for the first time again for a while, and what was supposed to happen was the sales of those items. Yeah, there was supposed to be a rev share, and every team would get an even share of that revenue, and that's great. I'm sad that didn't happen. I think that's a really good way of giving back to those teams that make those events, and also make it maybe not profitable, but start to make it sustainable for the teams. I think that's the first goal. Um, I think I think something that was also discussed was opening up the sponsor restrictions. So obviously there's still restrictions on like energy drinks for Rocket League and things like that. I know there was talk about opening those opportunities up for the likes of Red Bulls, your Monsters, etc. Like to come into the space, which is obviously an endemic brand to esports, and most other teams can have them, just not here in Rocket League currently. But I know there was talk about allowing that and changing the community guidelines to allow for that, which would have helped as well. I'm not saying we should be letting betting sponsors or stuff like that in, but some other some slight loosening of that would also help. Yeah, I think those things would have been a nice start and definitely provide some sustainability. I think the tournament structure also doesn't help with that currently.
Yeah, I've I'm kind of in a weird spot about like the way they're doing the tournament structure. Like the AFL format, I think makes more sense for qualifiers than it does for the World Championship. Uh,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
is like if you're trying to get the four best teams in the region, uh, then giving the teams that go through like the Swiss stage perfectly like, okay, they have one bad game uh, that entire weekend and they're out. It's like, are they really not a top four team, or are they really not the best team? I think we almost had like a six-way tie in North America for that fourth slot.
Yeah, it's wild. I agree. I think they should include. I think they do need to change that format to have just not. I hate single elim bracket. I hate the single elim
Yeah,
bracket.
I think
So
for top four it makes
yeah,
sense to a certain degree, but top eight to decide top four or even top two, uh, like it's only good at maybe deciding like who the best team is in the region, but it doesn't necessarily give you. It doesn't fulfill the purpose of like filtering this region down to the slots that they want to have
yeah.
represent that region. I don't feel.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's when there's so few spots as well. Obviously, we've
Mhm.
got less major spots this season. I think that makes it even more compounded. Um, so yeah, it's not a nice format. Like, luckily, it's. I mean, I'm sure it will affect people, and people, won't be happy about it. This split in particular, I think. I think this season, or this split in, sorry, the first split in Europe anyway, there was a very clear top four, I would say.
Mhm.
Whereas this second split, I would say there is a really strong top six. So maybe we'll see it be more of an issue this split than last. But yeah, we'll see. I think there's bigger issues with format though in terms of why are we still playing day one quals and day two quals as top
Yeah.
16 teams and top eight teams. It's kind of ridiculous. We were on our Raziers was streaming our day one quals, and in two games we scored 30 goals against one team. So
Mhm.
who's that fun for? Because it's not fun for the pros. It's not fun for the team that are getting smacked about. Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know what the idea or the thinking was behind that, but hopefully we can go back to having sort of closed quals on a Sunday. That would be quite nice. Top eight auto qual, 9 to 16 make closed quals on a Sunday to go through to the next event. That'd be nice. Yeah, there's a few changes I think that need to come, but I think at least Blast are starting to make changes
Mhm.
now to little bits and pieces. I think the two split thing was a bit of a shock to people as well. Only effectively your whole season could come down to basically 12 weeks. If you
Yeah.
don't make majors, you're only playing 12 weeks out of 52 in a year, which is pretty wild. And it doesn't really provide that level of sustainability for orgs either, having to go through those qualifiers and sometimes getting upset. That we saw a lot of upsets in EU this weekend with teams that were previously top 16 teams just not
Mhm.
making it. So yeah, I think some security for orgs in terms of the tournament structure would go a long way, as well as other things, major items and things like that.
Yeah, like that's something else too. Like, because it really doesn't make sense. Like the first 2 days of qualifiers, like there's at least one or two games where like the players are on KBN, like, or at least on my team. Like it's just like it's so lopsided. They get bored. They're just like, all right,
Yeah.
let's see what
Reserves was
happens.
doing the same
Yeah.
thing last split. Yeah, just playing keyboard and mouse. He's actually not bad on keyboard and mouse actually, but
Yeah.
um, it's just I just don't get the point of it because I don't understand who it's benefiting. I like
Mhm.
having an open qual. I definitely think we should still have open qualifiers. But I just don't think the top teams should necessarily have to play through them. Because it's just not fun.
Yeah. It's Let me get this. Sorry, I had a train go by, so I needed to
All
bring
right,
my
all good.
mic down a little bit. Uh, but that's where it is when it comes to the tournament structure. Like, what would your like ideal Rocket League esport look like as an org?
Yeah, I quite liked the structure last season. 3 splits, 3 majors and worlds. Obviously, I don't know whether we're going to get that third split back anytime soon, but um, yeah, I liked the way it went into a Swiss on a Sunday. I think Swiss is a decent-ish way of of narrowing down your top 8 or top 16 if it's on a qualifier weekend. I like it. I think it's decent. I'm much happier going into the main event knowing it's Swiss, having got through that double elim bracket on for qualifier, because I just don't like the double elim qualifier. Yeah, I much prefer Swiss, and I think I'd love to see 3 splits back. I'd love to see 3 main events with close calls on a Sunday, and then maybe like a different format. I actually quite like the group format. The groups that we had for spring, was it spring split last season? I don't mind that to whittle teams down as well, because I think you basically only had to win like 1 series to make top 8 effectively. I think in your group it was kind of wild because 3 went through, or to make top 12 maybe. But yeah, I don't mind the groups. I don't mind Swiss. I just don't like the Swiss into single elim. Just needs to be something after that that's just a bit nicer for deciding those top 4 teams, especially with so few major spots on the line.
Yeah, like I think for the major itself, it's perfect. Like, because you get the hype. It's all right. We're in the playoffs now. Like, do or die.
Yeah.
Like for that, I think it's perfect. It's international competition. At that point, like you're not really playing for who gets more points to go to this event. It's who's the best. All right, we found out who they are.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So I feel like it's just inverted. But is there anything else that you would do, like format wise, or do you like I'm trying to think, like a league format at all? Like, would that be more attractive to an org, or is it really not that different? As long as you have like the caliber of team that's going to be making top 8 or top 12 consistently.
I don't know. I think what I don't want to ever see is I don't want to see franchising in Rocket League. I don't mind the sort of soft franchising. So the model that Valorant kind of went for, where it was an application to choose the teams that went into the top league, and then anybody could still be relegated from that league. So all it did was get you in for the first split kind of thing. So I don't mind that as an idea for a league. I don't mind the old RLCS RLRS format if it's done properly. RLRS was always a bit of a mess, but if it's properly structured, I think it can work. It's hard to say for definite. But I didn't mind that format either. It would definitely provide more security, but it depends how you're going to do it. If you're just going to play every team in the league once, then it's only 10 games. So how you do that, I think, is the important part. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not against the league format, but I think it would definitely not be franchised. I'm pretty confident in a semi-franchise league that we wouldn't get RLCS. Probably, maybe in Europe. I don't know. We're a smaller org, but I'm honestly not sure whether we'd get in. But we'd look to get promoted and things like that, I'm sure. But yeah, definitely not a franchise league, but a league maybe.
Yeah, my idea has always been do like 2, maybe 3 qualifiers for like a 10-week season, maybe, or like a 8-week season where you have 2 matches every week, and then you have your top teams and everybody's played each other. Get that space for storylines, and then that's split 1, and then you just do it again. So like this, you get that 2 months of stability for making it, and then you have all this time that you can talk, you can game plan. You get a lot more room for like trash talk and rivalries to develop. Like there's a lot more healthy aspects, I think, of that, but we still keep that like openness that Rocket League is known for. So
yeah, I think that's a good idea as well. Yeah, I think having a league where you know who you're going to play every week is interesting as well, and probably makes the gameplay better to some extent. You can plan for your opponent better. there's not much of that now because you never know who you're going to get in round 2 Swiss or round
Hmm.
3 Swiss, or so yeah, it's much harder to do that. Um, I think, yeah, that could be an interesting format. I wouldn't be against that either. 10 weeks of 10 weeks of games or whatever, playing twice a week, that'd be really cool. Yeah, I'd be up for that. Yeah, that sounds okay.
Yeah. So I guess when it comes to like the business side of esports, not just Rocket League specifically, but well, is there anything that orgs have like done or tried to do that you're like, oh, that seems like a good idea every org should do?
Yeah, I think this is a really prevalent thing at the minute. I think because we're seeing esports teams have to evolve.
Hmm.
Um, and what I think the problem has been is that when esports teams kind of came about, they forgot that esports was invented to be a marketing tool. Esports was invented so that League of Legends could sell more skins or get more people playing the game or whatever by showcasing the highest talent. And when teams came along, they kind of forgot about that, I think, and they forgot that they had to have something to be able to market, and that's why we become so reliant on sponsorship, I guess. Um, so now teams are thinking about, right, what products do we have, and what are we marketing using our players and our teams? What are we using them to market? So I've seen a bunch of different things. I've seen recently teams opening their own like sort of media and creative agencies to offer that out to other teams, and like video and photography studios and things like that. I've seen obviously teams have tried all sorts like NFTs and blockchain and all
Hmm.
that sort of dodgy stuff that I don't understand well enough to to talk about. Yeah, there's loads of stuff. There's things that we've got in the pipeline at the minute that will give us some sustainability, I would say, and something to push towards that generates revenue that isn't necessarily reliant on results and things like that, which sometimes it often is. Um, yeah, there's a bunch of different things. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I'm like, yeah, wow, that was really cool. But there's always people innovating in this space. We're such a fresh industry and still
Hmm.
growing. I think there's so much room for development that I think is really really cool.
Yeah, I think like when it comes to like the like blockchain stuff, I think it's just nobody's figured out how to use it right yet, and so
Yeah,
like it's I think some people have figured out like some really scammy ways to use it, just because it's easy to think of a scam on something new that nobody knows nothing about. But I think the technology's there that could be something in the future. Uh, how it works, I don't know, but I do. From what I do understand of it, like there's something there. It just
yeah,
needs to be refined.
yeah. I think one cool thing that I did think about actually was there's I can't remember who it was, but doing virtual watch parties, but
Hmm.
like through VR. So all created spaces, like
Hmm.
those spaces can be sponsored and branded and things. It's all in VR, but everybody gets together and watches the games. Like you go to an esports bar or
Hmm.
whatever, but you're in your living room with your VR headset on and stuff. And I think that's really cool. That sort of stuff is really clever, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more of that with
Hmm.
sort of AR, playing a bigger role like
Yeah.
Google Glasses and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I like that sort of stuff. That's cool. It's proper nerdy, but look, that's the industry we're in, isn't it? So
Yeah.
yeah,
I would love to see like an augmented reality like at LAN. It's just like you put
that'd be
on your
sick.
glasses and then like the field just materializes in front of you, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah, that'd be really
the,
cool.
the closest thing to watching an Octane flip reset in real life.
Yeah,
Like I think
yeah,
it would
that'd be
just
awesome.
add that much more hype.
Yeah.
So
Yes, that'd be sick. Especially if you were in like if you're in like a hockey arena or something like that,
oh
and it
yeah.
just literally goes over the whole. That'd be That would be cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I don't know how expensive that would be to pull off, but
Yeah. Maybe we're
Mr.
like
Beast,
100 years in the future here or something.
yeah,
Yeah, but
I'm sure Mr. Beast could make a video about it.
true, true.
And I hear he's got quite the budget.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. Yeah, I'm sure something like that would be cool. I know orgs have done Rocket League in real life before, but it's never quite the same, is it? Like just
Hmm.
driving a car around in a field is it's still cool, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah. So I guess also like when it comes to this, we're like, here, what are these like cool ways that we can make money and stuff like that? Like, it seems like it could get to a certain point where like all these things are making money. Why do we have an esports team that's like spending this money? And like that's the conundrum that as I'm like talking with people in the space that it seems weird to be like, hey, let's do all these things to make money to have this team that's going to market for us. But eventually, like those things end up making enough money in and of themselves without the team. It's like, we could
True.
have a much more profitable business if we just stopped doing this. And we're seeing a lot of orgs kind of take that approach right now where they essentially just become like content groups and are just dropping esports teams.
Yeah, it's just boring. That's why.
Yeah.
Esports is exciting. I think that's why nobody got into esports. I don't think. Well, I mean, I'm sure none of the the OGs, the
Hmm.
people that have been around in esports for a long time. I don't think anybody got into it to go, oh, this could make us a lot of money. People got into esports because it was fun and it's competitive and people love competition. That's why football and
Hmm.
soccer, whatever you want to call it, yeah, it's so popular. And that's why sports is so big. I don't see esports being any different, and I'm sure that we'll figure out the sports model at some point. We don't have ticket sales in the same way that traditional sports have, or sort of media rights on TV and stuff. But all that stuff is will come, um, and I think those revenue streams will make the esports teams worth having as well, alongside the marketing capabilities that they kind of bring. You look at Man United now; they're obviously a huge team, one of the biggest teams in the world. They have huge sponsors that want to work with them because of the marketing capability that they have. Esports will go exactly the same
Hmm.
way for me. I think it's a matter of time, but we're just, as I say, we're still in the infancy at the minute, and not doing esports is just boring, isn't it? Like, there's no
Hmm.
point starting an esports company to then not do esports. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you think that having like more regionally based teams and like drumming up like local support uh would do more? Because I think that's the like if we look at K Corp or Gentlemates, like
yeah,
that seems to be like the advantage they have is on a international scale they may not necessarily be like the biggest org or have the biggest
yeah,
budget, but because pretty much only French people care about them, but the
yeah,
French only care about them. Like they're like
yeah.
there's not
I think
a they have
I
that
think it's
localization.
yeah, for sure. I think it's a really tough conversation, the localization topic. I think obviously Call of Duty and Overwatch etc. tried it, but they kind of half-arsed it
Hmm.
in the fact that they were called Vancouver Titans or whatever, but they'd never set foot in Vancouver or
Hmm.
whatever. London Royal Ravens, half the team had never been to the UK, so it's it was kind of like a half-assed effort, I think, for me. Like, didn't really quite do it well enough. I think for us, even for us, we do like local stuff with like where we boot camp. We
Hmm.
do talks to the local uni. We had the local uni in to do an event and to watch party our games and stuff, meet the team. So I think there is some of that, but I think the reason that it's so massive in France is, I mean, France is an awesome esports market for starters. Anyway, they just get it. The government recognizes it, the government supports its growth, etc., which is really big. Um, but I think it's much harder for English speaking teams where English is the first language for the team because there is so much competition and everybody speaks English,
Hmm.
across the globe. Whereas France, if you speak French, you're going to be supporting a French team, right? So I think they have a much smaller market that they're able to target a lot more vigorously than perhaps English speaking audiences. So yeah, I think it's easier for them, but also I think having huge streamers like Kometto and these people involved, and I think having genuine support for your org from a big influencer like that, look at Sergio Aguero and things like that. They're running their own esports org, and because it's genuine and it's organic, I think they get more support because of the fan base that they bring with them. Whereas, there's some organisations that have obviously brought on big influencers or big celebrities, but because they're not genuinely involved and it's not organic, like people know they can see through it as bullshit. I think that's why they don't maybe get the same support that the likes of Kometto and I can't remember Aguero's. Is it Crew? Aguero's is Crew, is it?
I think so, yeah.
I might have made that up. Sorry if I've just offended a load of South American fans there, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like the localization, I feel like this is something that a lot of people who like aren't like hardcore sports fans know, is like how subsidized like those stadiums are by like governments, like locally and all that. Like every NFL stadium in the United States is bought and paid for by the city. And like it's not the team, but the team like leases it for like this absurdly cheap amount for how much it costs to build. But like the NFL wouldn't be profitable if it wasn't that way. I think also the funny part is the NFL was a nonprofit up until 2008, where they got public pressure to stop being a nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is the thing. Like sports is just so far ahead, and I think having that local or regional, like even government support in that regard, that's something that we're massively missing still. And in the UK, particularly, like the current government do not understand esports. They don't care. So there's barely any support for esports here in the UK currently. So I think that really helps, and that'll be a big turning point, I think, for esports as well.
Yeah, I think probably the funniest thing is everybody kind of dogs on the state that I'm in, but we're the first state in the United States to pass any legislation that recognizes esports in any capacity. And basically the entire bill was like, hey, this isn't gambling. It's like there's skill involved in what we're doing. And so because there was somebody that was trying to be like, oh, like these, you can't hold tournaments for video games because it's just gambling. And we're like, no, like there's skill involved. It's not a game of chance. And so at least here in Arkansas, there's a legally recognized that gaming takes skill. So
okay. It's just things like that as well that we're still having that debate even 2024 is why like I say esports is still super in its infancy yet. So I'm sure there's so much room for growth, so much room.
Somebody hopped in the chat and they said
okay,
what are effective strategies for smaller esports orgs to compete with larger ones in player recruitment, sponsorships, and brand visibility?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think it's really difficult, and it's much more difficult than it was maybe like 6-7 years ago, 5 years ago, because there are such big orgs now with such big backing. I think it is hard to compete. I think being sensible about where you spend your money and trying to take the right players at the right time for the right amount of money. There is an element of luck to it, 100%. Like you can't always foresee how teams are going to perform or how well how big somebody's going to grow. Like one of your players might just suddenly start streaming one day and get loads of views, or things are luck based. But you just got to be sensible, really. Don't spend outside your means. I think that's one of the biggest problems, even with professional esports teams.
Hmm.
You look at G1 last year,
Oh yeah.
massive. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I think just be sensible. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. It's something that I always talk about. I'll never commit to overspending or like promising stuff that I just can't do for the team. It's something that we'll never do. So I think that's a big one. Just be realistic. Try and pick the best players at the best time. And in terms of like brands, you'll find brands that want to work with you, no matter how big you are. But maybe it's local or regional or something, and that you just have to tap into the contacts you've got or you can make. And networking's always big as well. It's still very much a game of who you know in esports, I would say, to some extent. So make as many contacts as you can as well.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question. So I guess, is there anything that you've always wanted to talk about, like when it comes to esports, that like anytime you come on a podcast or an interview and like that question doesn't get asked, but you're just dying for it to get asked so you can talk about it?
Oh, nice, stumped me now. No, I don't think so. I think something that we mentioned before we came on as well is we talked about that there's a lot of blame that sort of lands at the foot of Psyonix at the minute for the state of the esport. And I think it's really easy to do that because, they're the ones in charge. But also I think teams and players have a bigger responsibility to play in that as well. If we want to develop the scene, we have to be actively working towards that and actively working to grow the scene. There's very few players that make content. There's very few players that stream. There's very few orgs that even can be asked to make announcement videos for their new team, which really grinds my gears. I think there needs to be more investment in everything that we're doing, especially around content and advertising and marketing what we do. In order to grow the scene, the more eyes that are on Rocket League, the better it is for everybody. So I think there needs to be a lot more work on that regard, and that certainly doesn't fall at the feet of Psyonix. That falls at the feet of everybody that's involved in the scene: players, staff, organizations. So yeah, I think that's a big one for me. It's dead easy to blame Psyonix, and yeah, some things are their fault, but also there's more that we could be doing to develop our own stuff as well. So yeah,
because I mean, it's, if we look at it, like how many people show up to just generically watch Rocket League? Only like the really diehard fans. It's like, what is chat filled with? It's like, when does Squishy play? Or Justin's like, it's the players. Like when Zen was the talk of the town, like it was like, when does Zen play? It's like, it's all about Zen. It's like the people watched for the person, and that person was part of the org, and then that org was playing or it wasn't playing. Like I think it was like 1 or 2 seasons ago. I think 2021, 2022. Like when NRG didn't make the playoffs in LA, like that was the lowest viewership of a tournament. Like it just dipped because they weren't there and everybody wanted to watch them play. So it's like, when we have an esport that's been carried by so few, when that one player isn't there, and to see like that massive of a drop, imagine if every single player there had worked to get 10% of that interest. Then like if that one big person's not there, there's still enough it'll be a noticeable drop, but not I think it was like a 25% drop in viewership or something absurd like that. Like
I think it's crazy. I think, and you look, who the big players are and the big names. Yeah, of course, Zen's one of the big names right now. And he to be fair to Zen, he does a bit of content and stuff, which is great. I think AppJack is the absolute shining light for me when it comes to content and
Hmm.
streaming and stuff. Jack is phenomenally good at that. He's built, one of the biggest brands in Rocket League, and yeah. For me, he's kind of like if there was going to be someone that you go, oh, he's the person that you wish all content, all Rocket League players were like. That'd definitely be the case. And I know everybody's means are not the same.
Hmm.
Not everybody can afford to hire a video editor, or not everyone can afford to, do travel to events if they're not qualified and things like
Hmm.
that. But there's always things you can do. I think to grow and market yourself, even if it's just being active on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
Getting involved in the conversation, and people will become fans of you for your personality as well. I think so. Yeah, I think the players and the orgs, I think we can do more, definitely to grow the space as well.
So, do you think that org should start putting that in the contracts as
Um,
requirements?
so I'm sure some orgs do have some requirements in. So,
Hmm.
um, for instance, we have that. The players have to share certain content, and obviously
Hmm.
if they're involved in content they normally do anyway, but like they have to share a certain amount of content every month or whatever. We have incentives in our current contracts for all three of our players, for streaming, so they
Hmm.
can earn extra revenue just for streaming every month, something that, for the likes of Cash that we've just signed. Cash streams so much anyway, he's going to
Hmm.
hit it pretty much every month without fail, without doing
Yeah.
anything differently. Um, but yeah, I think, we've put that in our contracts to try and incentivize them to grow their personal brand. We obviously work really closely. We put out daily content on TikTok that features the players,
Hmm.
and where possible, we drive audience to them from that video as well, or same on like Instagram and Twitter or wherever else. Um, I think what we try and do is we get people to come for the players, so they come and
Hmm.
watch Resolve for the player that they like, and hopefully stay because they like the content that we do and the way that we work with that player, etc. So um yeah, I think there could be more in contracts. I think something that we've had this season as well is that um we have had agreements that the players have to use decals in certain games and certain scenarios, or at
Hmm.
least like 2/3 of them have to be using it,
Hmm.
um, and things like that. So which helps us as well, because obviously that generates revenue. If they pop off to wearing, using our decal, then everybody watching goes, I want to be like Raziz. I can go and get that. I
Yeah.
can go get that decal and play like him or whatever. So yeah, things like that. I think we should be including in contracts, and trying to do more to try and emphasize that. But I'm sure that probably costs additional revenue sometimes as well.
Hmm.
When you're negotiating with agents and things, I'm sure sometimes they'll go, well, if you want to put that in the contract, it'll cost you X amount more a month. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's just about players being understanding as well, and agents being understanding that it's for everyone's best interest, not not the org trying to get more work out of them necessarily. It's for their benefit as well. So
Yeah. So you think we go into more incentives based positive versus if you don't do this, like you're just not fulfilling your contract is like the way to go right now?
I think with certain things, yeah, I think part of the problem is that these players earn so much money every month that sometimes the incentive that you give them for streaming, it's
Hmm.
not really worth it for them.
Hmm.
Let's say they're earning $5,000 a month, and their streaming incentive is 500, $500. Then they're not they're not going to be
Yeah.
that bothered like to do it. So I think it's about balancing it and making sure that the incentive is both achievable and rewarding enough, but
Hmm.
also so that it makes the players want to do it, but doesn't break the bank. I guess it's a really difficult one to balance and get right. Um, but yeah, maybe there are certain things that you can just be like, no, those are sort of, you have to do that. That's the bare minimum kind of thing, and we do have that. Um, I think we have something about like being active on socials. Like if you haven't tweeted for like 3 months or something,
Hmm.
that's not really on, because that doesn't help us. So
Yeah.
that's why we have things about sharing, a certain amount of content every month and things. So yeah.
Yeah. So what about uh, team behavioral or like practice schedules or something like that? Like that's one of the things that kind of surprises me. It's not in uh, esports yet. Is like, hey, like you need to be doing X amount of practice on your fundamentals, uh, and hey, you need to be doing X, Y, or Z, and like we've got this practice schedule. Like we expect this,
Yeah.
like I get to a certain extent, like we're dealing with kids in Rocket League, but like in the more established esports, even I've not heard of like practice schedules being a part of the contracts, and that's
Okay.
something that uh, just coming from that traditional sports background, like that's really surprising. That yeah, come play for us, do whatever you want is kind of
Okay.
the mindset. And I get there's you want to have some hands off and let your coaches do their job, but I'm kind of surprised that there's very little, if anything, in the contracts related to that.
So I was actually speaking to an org maybe 2 weeks ago that was talking about specific that it was in their contracts about they had
Hmm.
to be playing the game X amount of hours every
Hmm.
past 2 weeks or whatever. Um, so there are some. We don't have that in our contract in that regard, but we do have that. Um, the players have to be at scrims. So like
Hmm.
the coach organises scrims for the week, they have to be there. They have to be playing and for those. There is obviously loose wording about being playing enough of the game that their skills
Hmm.
are like sort of maintained, etc. But yeah, we have a fine policy obviously if they don't turn up for scrims or they don't do whatever it might be. Yeah, so we do enforce it, but not specifically worded in terms of hours. I guess is the best way. I think we're quite lucky as well, though. Like we boot camp for the entirety of the split, so
Hmm.
we have the players with us constantly. So they can't really get away with not playing the game because we're with them all the time. We're really actually very lucky with this current team that we've got right now. The boys have been up before me every morning at the gym.
Hmm.
So at the gym first thing in the morning, coming back, getting breakfast. We normally do a bit of content and things like that in the morning, sort of like or around lunchtime, and then we normally go into a bit of play, into scrims, and then in the evening it varies depending on what we're doing that day. So it might be a team out into wherever, or whatever it might be. But the days are quite structured at the moment, so
Hmm.
I feel that helps how hands on we are, and we have the ability. But not everybody has that same luxury, I guess. So I guess whatever suits that org.
Yeah, so like you guys don't necessarily need to have it in your contracts because they're at the facility, and so
Yeah,
like it's pretty easy just by like company culture of, hey, this is the way we do things around here.
yeah,
And
and
it's
as well, like if one of them's just sat in their bedroom all day, we'd be like,
mhm,
"Oh, you need to be playing the game," kind of thing, and you can't
mhm.
really get away with that. When your other two teammates are in the in the room practicing, etc. So yeah, it's yeah, it's kind of built into them by accident anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other fun topics that we could dive into. 'Cause it's been a really fun time. Is there any questions you have for me? I guess let's turn this into your
Um,
podcast for a minute.
okay, yeah, okay. I know one thing that was a big topic of debate. This whole NAEU boot camp debate a little while ago.
Hmm.
What's your as a coach? What's your opinion on boot camps and how important and why do NA not boot camp as much as EU? Perhaps do you think?
I think a lot of it comes down to money and like the incentive structures. Players are trying to get the highest salary possible versus get the highest level of support directly from the org. Uh,
Okay.
and so I think that's why, for the most part uh, of the history of NA, it's only been like very few teams that boot camp or they boot camp on their own dime or something like that. So it's like I've heard some teams be like, oh, they didn't want to pay for this boot camp experience. It's like, well, you asked for quite a bit of money. Like you're asking them to pay, a third of each of your salaries each month. It's like, just take a third of each of your salaries and go do it yourself because you chose that incentive structure.
Okay.
So I think some of it just has to do with the youth and that mindset around it. So I think as the players get older and as the business side of things become more aware and relevant to them, versus let me get the biggest contract because bragging rights, you know, or just being young. I think that's been the main difference. As far as like the actual impact of it, wasn't it you guys that did the study, or somebody did a study on like boot camping over in Europe?
It wasn't us. Yeah, I'm not sure.
There was some EU team. Nick references it all the time on how like the second or third one, like you get one or two more places on average after boot camping.
It's really interesting because my opinion is that it doesn't work for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think that certain players it works really well for. Other players don't want to be at boot camp, but
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's necessary for players to develop because I think it gets you outside of your comfort zone and playing in a different space. That if you make a LAN, you're not going to be playing in your bedroom, are you? So
Yeah.
I think it's a necessary evil, even for the players that don't necessarily perform as well. But I don't think it works for everyone in terms of making them a better player necessarily.
Yeah, I think also it comes down to the qualities of the boot camp. Because it's one thing to be like, hey, like let's all
True. Yeah.
live together and all that. It's another to be like, all right, hey, like 6 a.m. we're waking up and doing physical workout. All right, now we're eating this regimented breakfast, and that being more like an actual like boot camp.
Yeah.
Versus, all right, hey, we're just all being together.
Yeah.
And I think for different teams, like one may work better than the other. But I think that's also something to do with it. I think we've used the term boot camp loosely in some cases.
Yeah, I think it massively changes as well because the amount and we're very hands on, so maybe this would work well for other people and not work well for others as well. But like, we are reasonably reasonably strict on like diet and like well-being whilst the players are here as well. We don't just allow them to go and eat Mackey's every day, McDonald's every day and things like that because we want them to be healthy. We're not going to force them to the gym, and if they go, no, I don't want to eat that, they can go and eat what they want. We can't. We're not going to punish them, but like we try and encourage them to like, and we, this week their meals are getting all cooked for them from somewhere local. Last week I was at boot camp and cooked for them every night. So it varies, but at least then it's easy for them. I think the key is to make it easy for them to make healthy choices and sensible choices as well. It's not that we're forcing them to do it, but we're making it easier for them to do that than even to go to McDonald's. So so I think making those choices easy, I think, is important as well.
It's really easy to just go, hey, do you guys want a blackened chicken salad tonight for dinner? They just go, sure, cool. And then you cook it. It's like they just show up with it and they're like, wow, that was good and it was healthy. Versus like, you guys are eating healthy, deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because I think that's the just my dad's military and he was a firefighter for a while. So like when I heard like teams were boot camping, like I was expecting like this like this intense like workout, like things. And then I found out like what most boot camps actually are like. I was just like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, that's
I think,
yeah,
yeah, I think when most people say boot camp, they just mean the players play together in the same room and
yeah,
nothing else changes. I think for us that's quite different, and I'm sure for certain other teams as well. But um, I think the point of a boot camp is not just to be in the same room playing as one another. I think it's to make sure that you're on the same page. You're doing things as a team, like outside of the game, like for team building
hmm
and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think that's all really important. I think that's what makes the difference.
yeah,
Not that our results in split one would dictate that, but
hmm
but yeah, that's the idea anyway, I suppose. So yeah,
yeah. I think also like with this space and there being an actual off season, it feels like now, like I feel like the boot camps need to happen before the season and like be like that more intensive, like, hey, like these 2 weeks, we're gonna go out and do really hard things, like physically and like challenge that'll, not quite to the level of, Hell Week, uh, but like something like that, and be like, all right, cool, like you've done hard stuff and like you've learned the stress management skills. Okay, all right, now we're gonna like talk tactics and we're gonna go over a bunch of film and
yeah,
like I feel like there's like this is kind of like a hyperbolic statement, but to a certain extent true. Like there were 15-year-olds that were storming the beaches of Normandy and Iwo Jima back in the 1940s. Like if they can have the mental fortitude to do that, and there's ways to develop that in people to do something that incredibly difficult, we can help some kids play in front of the crowd if we take it seriously.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think AJR had a performance. He calls it stimulus desensitization as well.
Hmm
So it's all about giving them stress in a way that is like that they can develop to deal with that stress. So that when you stick them in front of the crowd, they just don't go and just completely freeze.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's something that we try and do as well. And it is hard, like you say, to cram it into such a short amount of time. I would say, which is why last split we were at boot camp. I think like nearly 2 weeks before the season started. This
hmm
week it was this time it was about 10 days, maybe 9 days, something like that. So it's not perfect, but at least it gives them a little bit of time to settle into the setups and get used to the way that things are and start getting used to that sort of daily
hmm
stress and things like that. So yeah, I think it's all really important if you can do it. I think it's key.
Yeah. I just think there's got to be, putting somebody through like a more realistic boot camp or a more
Yeah,
traditional boot camp. Uh, I think finding the right balance with that, especially with kids, is you're a police officer. You've been through some level of stress management
yeah.
drills, to say the least. Uh,
Yeah, it kind of makes me immune as well, though, because sometimes I think like, why are you getting upset about that? Because for me, it just feels so like,
Trivial.
if yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes, and I think that is something that sometimes I have to go, well, Jeff, just because that's how you think about it, that's not how everyone thinks about it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I think that's going to be, I think, the next step uh, for esports. Like, I think, like, as a whole, like, when it comes to like these boot camping type things, I think that's going to be the next, I guess, gold mine. Is like, it's one thing to have like performance psych, and we have one as well, and it's been helping tremendously. But
Yeah,
I think there's just a different level that you can't explain unless you've been through something
yeah,
similar. Of like, when you have somebody hitting you in the face and you're not phased by it, uh, because you've learned to handle like those types of stresses, it's easier to handle other situations that
yeah.
induce that same level of stress.
For sure. for sure. I think it's still different. Like, as it's interesting because even despite that, sometimes I sit at home watching the games or sit
Mhm.
wherever. Like if I'm at boot camp with the boys, sit behind them watching the games, and it is still stressful,
Mhm.
but it's not stressful in a way that it makes you shut down, I guess, and that's what
Mhm.
that's the key, I guess. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So that's my thoughts when it comes to boot
Yeah,
camps.
yep, sweet. Yeah, that was a huge old tangent.
Yeah.
It was such an argument. It's such an argument on Twitter, and I don't feel like you can really get that into like a tweet.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I think that's what do you mean by boot camp? I think is like the question that
Yeah,
you have to ask when
yeah,
you're looking at these teams and if it's effective or not.
yeah.
So
Agreed. Yeah, bro.
yeah. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we wrap up? Or
No, I think that's it off the top of my head. I'm sure there'll be something I get off the call and go, oh, we should have talked about this, but
yeah, that's what
yeah,
we bring you
right.
back on for.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Sweet.
Yeah. Well, hey, it was good to meet you. It's been fun. Let's definitely do this again sometime. I
Yeah,
think we'll have
awesome.
some fun conversation to have after this next major for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, bro. Yeah, thank you very much for having me.